back to the channel. I'd rather stay in my stunning automobile, but then I couldn't do this review.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at Transformers Kingdom Deluxe class tracks, and unfortunately, no grand opening like some of my previous reviews. I definitely will not be saying that this is almost MP worthy, nor will I be saying that this is the most definitive representation of this particular character, as, to be honest, it's not. This guy does have a lot of flaws, and really and truly is probably one of the biggest letdowns that I personally have handled throughout Kingdom, and specifically Wave 3. That's not to say that he's a terrible figure, but there are just some internal and structural designs that I really think Hasbro ultimately dropped the ball on. But we'll take a look firstly at what is one of the figure's selling points, that being the impeccable detail as well as really nice paint apps. The figure looks great from a front-on perspective, especially where that head sculpt is concerned. We've got some exceptional looking sculpt work, really awesome paint, and you can even see here for the torso region, despite this being a faux piece, I think this has turned out impeccably well. And we do in fact actually get the wings here on the shoulders, which for a deluxe class is rather impressive, and this guy also is a triple changer as well, so we also do get the flying car mode. So I guess in some regards sacrifices did have to be made in order to give him all three modes, but ultimately I do think some of these issues that I shall go into, especially throughout transformation, could have been easily rectified. You can see here for the forearms, I think this paint detailing has turned out so nicely, especially considering how precise they've managed to apply that yellow. And you can see here for the lower section, really clean crisp white paint here. And then as we take a look here down to the lower section, I do believe that the shins are also painted, which looks quite nice. You can see how they are a little more visually appealing when in comparison to the bland grey that we get here for the thighs, but I don't think these look too bad at all. And they have actually sculpted the inside of the legs just to make some of those hollow gaps look slightly more visually appealing. But something which I just cannot get over for this figure is the legs. The foot looks awful. You can see we've got this massive ghastly gap literally between the foot and where the lower section of the leg is, and I honestly think the next Transformers toy line is trapped somewhere in this gap, as it is massive, really unsightly. And when you actually do get this figure posed, it once again doesn't look the best. As we spin around here to the side of tracks, once again you can see that he is rather odd as far as design is concerned. We have got a lot of hollow spaces, and this guy really does harken me back to some of those cheaper Age of Extinction figures, especially where the transparent clear plastic is concerned, which I think is a major flawed decision, as I definitely think over time this is going to become brittle and crack, and there is actually a step during conversion which cringes me out every single time. But for the details on the back of the wings, you can see really nice looking panel lining, which I think looks awesome. And as far as accessories go, we do get the cannon here at the top, which has been sculpted quite nicely. It is, however, missing some of the paint apps, but I don't think that's anything to write home about. The sculpt looks really awesome and can actually swivel left to right, and you could of course completely remove this. And we do get his very G1 accurate looking blaster, which too I think has been sculpted quite nicely, albeit not painted at all. Now for articulation, Trax does have a ball joint here at the head, although its movement is slightly restricted due to it essentially being on the back of this post. You can see that the head is going to hinder this, and unfortunately the neck joint is rather short, meaning that the side of the helmet is more than likely going to bump into this upper torso. But you can get him looking left to right just ever so slightly. He can also look up and down slightly. We do get a rotation here at the shoulder, albeit at a slight angle due to transformation. We also do get a hinge joint out to the sides, rotation at the bicep, 90 there at the actual elbow, full waist rotation. The skirt can hinge out of the way in order to accommodate the legs forwards and backwards, but for a brand new mold, the legs are incredibly loose and floppy. Now I won't detract points for this, as this could just be an isolated issue on my copy, but for a brand new figure, this is something that I personally haven't experienced in a very long time, since that Studio Series 2007 Bumblebee. So I am hoping that this is just an isolated issue, but we also do get a hinge joint here out to the side, full rotation at the thigh, 90-degree bend there at the knee, and then here for the foot, it is on a ball joint, so can pivot forwards and backwards as well as left to right. But there is no denying that that is such an ugly design. And something also which I have an issue with is that at least here on this leg, this side does just not want to tab in at all, meaning that he really is a loose and floppy mess to actually pose around, which is once again such a shame. But from a front-on perspective, if you have him displayed with some of the other Autobots, I don't think he's going to look too bad at all. The character definitely does look incredibly visually appealing, but for me, if I had to choose of which mode to store him in, it would be by far his stunning automobile. Here for a War for Cybertron Trilogy Deluxe size comparison, we've got tracks compared next to Hoist, Sunstreaker, and Warpath, and I actually think the scale between all of these deluxe figures works incredibly well, so it's definitely nice to see Hasbro trying to keep the scaling consistent between the deluxe figures. But out of all four of these, if you were to ask me which is the weakest figure, I would unfortunately definitely have to go with Trax, as I think he has the worst build quality and definitely is the least stable out of them all. So transformation, this is definitely where I believe most of you are going to see some of the major problems that I have with this figure, and the conversion is not fun to do at all. There is one step in particular which took me so long to actually get used to, as it really does require a lot of manipulating certain joints, and for a deluxe figure, especially being on the slightly smaller scale of deluxe, it certainly can be a rather frustrating experience, especially those first couple of times round. But to begin with, you are of course going to want to remove both of the accessories, so just set these here off to the sides. We can then collapse the wrists into the hollow cavities here of the arms, and to be honest, I don't really even have a massive issue with these hollow gaps, but it is something that I wish maybe they could have found a better way around. Perhaps if this could have just compressed in and then extended out, that maybe would have looked slightly better, but nevertheless, just fold those in like so. We can then come here to the back, detach this entire section. Now, this entire piece here is completely transparent, which honestly is so cringeworthy, as it's pretty much 65-70% of the vehicle mode, and if you crack any of this, my goodness, the figure is going to be absolutely ruined. You're then going to want to extend this windscreen until this does actually snap into place, which is a step that also I'm not a huge fan of. You can see how it is held in there via pins, which no doubt will stress and snap over time. We can then take this region, rotate this here over the top of his forehead. You're then going to want to take the faux chest, snap this section apart, extend this joint and rotate here around. We can then take this pin joint here where the faux chest piece is holstered onto and just completely compress that like so. Now we turn to the legs. Then this is definitely the most finicky part of the conversion. You're going to want to take the shin plate here, pull this forwards and then collapse this joint in, and then whilst that's collapsed in, you can see a secondary white joint that you're actually going to want to bring up and over, and the foot will in fact completely slide over the skirt plate, so just pop that there over, and once complete we can then just compress that in, and that is essentially one section of the front vehicle fully converted. We'll then take the foot, hinge this section up and repeat the exact same process. So disengage this, bring this section forwards. We can then take this hinge joint here and bring this all around, and once again you can just see how fiddly this guy is. Pull that there over the top and then snap that into place. We can then come here to the front of the vehicle, snap all of this in. We can then take both of the feet, ensure that they are facing upwards. Now, these sections really and truly do not like to stay tabbed in all that well. When we actually do get the front windscreen pegged on, you'll notice that this one, especially on my copy, does have a tendency to detach, which once again is not the best as far as build is concerned. But we'll want to bring this here up and over, and now comes the dreaded part of the conversion, tabbing this entire transparent piece into this section. Now, you will want to slide where these side view mirrors are into these grooves, which isn't that bad to do, but this step certainly is. So under here we have got a huge tab that will peg into some slots. Under here you can see that square peg, and then you're going to want to get these transparent tabs fitting underneath the hood of the vehicle, and my goodness, this is awful to do. You have to apply so much pressure to actually get this to slide in correctly, and 100% I do think that over time this could become brittle, much like Studio Series 86 Jazz, and could potentially be a major QC issue for Hasbro. But keep that tabbed in, and whilst we're here I will actually show you the flying car mode. So you will want to just pull the arms out here to the side, extend the wings, and then we do get some rear fins here which you can just pull up, and that is effectively the flying car mode, which I actually think looks quite decent. You can see here it definitely resembles what we saw on the show. We've got some nice detailing on these rear fins, and you can once again see the wings that are a carryover from the robot mode. And here for the arms, you can actually orientate this around if you so desire. It's really up to your own personal preference. This is a nice bonus mode, but if this was the reason why the figure was so convoluted in bot mode, especially as far as stability is concerned, I maybe would have preferred them just to completely scrap this in general. But then saying that, this is more of a mistransformation than anything, and I think this is a look that you could probably pull off on most generation Transformers figures, so maybe this wasn't the reason as to why bot mode is so floppy. But nevertheless, take the wheels here, fold these sections in, rotate here at the forearm, and we've got these tiny little pegs, which once again I definitely think will break over time, as we're going to scoot the forearm in and actually snap that there into place. We can then take the wing, collapse that there, come here to this side and repeat the exact same process. So just scoot that in there, snap that into place, fold the wing in, fold these rear sections down, and here we have Trax more or less fully transformed into his rather stunning automobile mode. And I've got to be honest and say that I really love how this has turned out. Now, of course, it is a little more stylized when in comparison to what we saw in the cartoon series, and it's not a dead-on recreation like the Masterpiece figure. As in an attempt to actually avoid being hounded by Corvette, Hasbro of course had to change a few of the elements just to differentiate him from a real-life vehicle, but I think the end result looks awesome. Now, the entire top section, as as you saw, is transparent plastic, meaning that all of the blue is paint, and this section here is cast blue, and I actually think they've done a fantastic job in colour matching. It looks leaps and bounds better than what we got on Sunstreaker. I think this really nice detail here at the front's turned out impeccably well. You can see some really nice definition there, as well as the Autobot insignia. We've got some awesome skull work here to the front of the vehicle. The side of the vehicle too comes together really nicely, and barely no panel lines either. I think it's quite a sleek looking alt mode, and you can see here for the back we've got where the license plate would be, where the rear lights would be. It definitely is a very impressive vehicle. I really like this, and I love the transparent blue plastic that we get here for the actual windscreen. But if I had the option to make this a complete solid piece, meaning that this maybe would have been a black colour scheme, I completely would have opted to go with that, as I just do not like transparent plastic on figures, especially nowadays as the plastic is so thin and brittle. As far as weapon storage is concerned, we can take this turret cannon here, peg that into the back, and of course we can take the smaller blaster and snap that there into place, which looks quite cool. The rear wheels are pinned on, which I'm a massive fan of. Unfortunately, the front two are mushroom pegs, so the figure does roll rather okay along the ground. Just to demonstrate that, you can see you can roll fairly nicely, but it's by no stretch of the imagination as good as it would be if all two pairs of wheels were in fact pinned. But really nice looking vehicle mode, and as mentioned, this is by far my preferred look for the character out of all three of his modes. And here for a very quick deluxe vehicle mode comparison, we've got tracks compared next to Sunstreaker, and you can see here in vehicle mode, much like robot mode, I think Hasbro have been rather successful in continuing a coherent scale. This is more or less exactly what we saw in the series, and as far as a real life representation is concerned, I believe a Corvette would definitely be a little more streamlined when in comparison to a Lamborghini Countach. So props to Hasbro where that is concerned. They definitely do look really nice with one another. I just really wish that once again they could have refined some of the joints in tracks just to make him a little more stable, much like we've gotten here with Sunstreaker. So to conclude my review for Transformers Kingdom Deluxe Class tracks, overall, as you could probably guess from this review, this guy certainly is a mixed bag for me, and that's rather surprising considering for the most part I've been thoroughly impressed with pretty much all of these Wolf Cybertron figures. I think as far as robot mode representation is concerned, the figure looks fantastic, really nice looking paint, really nice looking sculpt work, but the actual functionality of the guy is massively flawed, especially where those legs are concerned. I think in some regards Hasbro made this character a little too complex for his scale, which ultimately means that he does definitely sacrifice in some areas, such as the stability in some of his joints. I will say for certain that I am not a fan at all of how the feet look in bot mode. I think that gap between the shins and the foot is atrocious and is something that really should have been reworked, and one of the massive issues that I have with this figure is that essentially 60%, 65%, maybe even 70% of the vehicle mode is made out of transparent clear plastic, which if you look at some of the reports from Studio Series 86 Jazz, oh my goodness, that guy literally breaks all the time, and this figure I can definitely see breaking as well, considering that he's made out of a lot thinner plastic than what we got with that Jazz figure, and that connection where you have to snap the hood of the vehicle into the actual windscreen is honestly so cringeworthy. Every single time that I go to do it, I literally think that I'm going to break the connection. Overall, if you're a fan of the character and the War for Cybertron line in general, I don't think that you'll be too disappointed in this figure, but definitely don't be setting your expectations too high, as for me at least, he is the weakest out of the kingdom so far, and that is really and truly such a shame. I would love to know down in the comment section below on what you guys think of this figure. Do you agree with my thoughts? Do you perhaps think that I'm being too harsh on this guy, or do you completely disagree with me? And as always, thank you all so much for watching, and until my next review, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.